From Canada, Citizens Forum, where we look at the important issues of the day through a lens of democracy and media and try to figure out, how do we build a better country for ourselves? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Citizens Forum. It is Monday, March the 24th, 2025. My guest in this segment is Alan Cassels. Alan is a drug policy researcher. He works at the University of Victoria. He's been in the field a long time. He's written a few books, including one called Selling Sickness, which was a bit of a hit and became quite famous. You've done very nice. You've done documentaries with CBC. So, you're somebody in the field, you know what's going on, and you've often spoken out against the pharmaceutical industry for the way they operate. Today, we're going to talk about obesity. But before we start, I just want to point out that I think the stories you're going to tell and the facts you're going to bring out is the way the pharmaceutical industry always operates. This isn't something new or different. This is just business as usual. And we are the guinea pigs and the suckers who pay for it and then pay the price.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my area of research and what I've written about a lot over the years is what I would call disease mongering. And so this is the legitimate, or I might say illegitimate, approach by the pharmaceutical companies and their minions to take diseases and shape them into things that can be treated with drugs. And so across a whole range of different conditions, from things like high cholesterol to osteoporosis, to attention deficit disorder. These are normal things that occur in the course of one's life. And oftentimes, more often than not, can be left alone and not treated with drugs, though the pharmaceutical industry is very good at taking these conditions and shaping them and driving prescribing for all kinds of nefarious reasons. And when you suggest we talk about obesity, I think that's probably the most recent example on my radar. And this is partly due to the fact that there is a new class of drugs that are heavily promoted, and they're used to essentially get people to lose weight. They're injectable drugs called GLP-1 inhibitors. They go by the trade name of Ozempic or Wegovy. People will see them marketed on the sides of buses and in advertisements on TV and on radio and so on. And these drugs were designed to treat high blood sugar. So for people with type 2 diabetes, they discovered in the course of using these drugs that people tend to lose a certain amount of weight. And if you're a pharmaceutical company, that's where the money is. It's not in a small percentage of the population that might have high blood sugars, though there's controversy around the degree to which treating those people with drugs is a good idea or not. But now they are taking these drugs and they're promoting them to everyone who wishes to lose weight. And as you probably know, in Canada and the US, statistics would say something like 40% of us are overweight. Maybe 20% of people have clinical obesity, and these people, for whatever reason, have difficulty losing weight. These drugs are promoted to this group, and they're relatively effective. Though, to say effective, you have to sort of put that in some terms. They're effective for as long as you take the drug. So if someone who starts taking a GLP-1 inhibitor like an Ozempic, they may lose weight over the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks or several months. But if they ever stop taking the drug, the weight comes back right away. And so it's kind of like these drugs are designed to be used forever. And this is very problematic. These drugs are tested in short-term trials. We don't really know the full extent of long-term harm, and we do know that there are some significant harms related to these drugs. The reason why this is of interest to a person like me who looks at disease mongering is that there have been some recent marketing of the condition that suggests that more and more people, younger people, and people who maybe not even have a weight problem should be starting to take these drugs. There was a session sponsored by the Globe and Mail, Canada's national newspaper, a couple weeks ago with the lead health journalist there, Andre Picard, sponsoring this 2.5-hour session to talk about weight loss. And there are many things that people could do and should do if they want to maintain their weight, and or reduce what they weigh, and typically that comes down to basic lifestyle things like diet, exercise, and getting proper sleep and things like that. However, those things seem to be pushed aside in the push to get more and more people to take these drugs. They're very expensive. In the US, people can spend about $1,000 a month on these weekly injections. In Canada, it's quite a bit less than that, but it's still in the hundreds of dollars. And from the perspective of a drug policy guy, the main problem is that we don't know what the long-term consequences are of giving tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people a drug for which it's really just for diabetes, not specifically for weight loss. And these drugs are being used in a fashion that's probably way overblown.
I read a column that you wrote about that Globe and Mail event, mm-hmm. and in it you mentioned the idea that really being overweight is not necessarily a medical problem, and perhaps even being obese is not really a medical problem in terms of your long-term health.
Absolutely. So one of the ways they measure weight, they use a thing called the BMI. It's a body mass index. It's a ratio between your height and your weight. And even normally sized people, I mean, if you look at me, I would not say that I'm close to overweight, but if you were to check my height versus my weight, I would be around 25 or so on this scale. And 25 is considered borderline overweight.
Oh.
Most of us would be somewhere between 25 and 30, which would be considered to be overweight, bordering on obesity. This is a marker of health, which is, I would argue, and others have written and done papers on this, that this is an illegitimate way to define someone's health. A lot of people who are big, they're muscular, they might have a very high BMI, they could be considered overweight and hence a candidate or a consumer of a drug such as this. And so just the definition of the disease we see expanded in a way that grabs more and more people. In this book, I should say that the best example of the selling of sickness doesn't have to do with being overweight. It has to do with cholesterol. We all have cholesterol in our blood. It's an essential component of our bodies, and that the pharmaceutical industry and their researchers that they paid to work for them would redefine high cholesterol in a way that captures more and more people. And we found, we document in the book that in the late 90s, the pharmaceutical industry, with the help of groups like the American Heart Association and so on, redefined what is high cholesterol and lowered the bar, which expanded the pool of people that should be taking cholesterol-lowering drugs by 50 million people overnight. This is not a medical advance. This is I would say an exaggeration of illness. And again, these are drugs that don't treat a condition now. You take them in order to prevent a future event. Might be a heart attack or a stroke. And the same thing is happening with obesity. They're saying if you're overweight or borderline obese, you have a higher risk of perhaps developing heart conditions or even perhaps cancer. Therefore, to reduce that risk, you should be taking, or you should be doing whatever you can to reduce your weight. And a lot of people have difficulty with modifying their lifestyle. And so the drugs become a kind of quick fix.
I'm shocked that what you said about your BMI, body mass index, if
Yeah.
someone like you is called borderline,
Overweight. Yeah.
yeah, then in my mind, it completely changes the what's going on, because I always
Yes.
thought borderline overweight was you were really overweight, but you're not.
No. And
So
and what's
what they
interesting, Jack, is that in this session that was sponsored by the Globe and Mail, they had an expert who, a physician paid for by the drug company that makes the drug, who said that why should we wait till people become overweight? We should be prescribing these drugs before. So this is what you would call prescribing a drug for pre-obesity, just like we've got pre-diabetes and pre-hypertension. So you're basically prescribing them to the worried well, not to the legitimately sick.
And one big problem is these drugs always have side effects,
Absolutely, and really, some of the troubling side effects related to the GLP-1s. There's all kinds of gastric problems they can cause. People sometimes lose so much weight that their skin looks very gaunt. So it changes how people look. And I mean, there are examples of people who you look at them and you say, you're a normal, healthy weight. Why would you be taking a drug like this? And they turn into scarecrows. It just does not seem to be a health advance. And again, that effect only lasts as long as you keep taking the drug. And anybody who comes at you and says you need to be taking a drug for the rest of your life, you need a second opinion on that.
yeah, yeah. Um, and you mentioned in your book, Selling Sickness, the issue of cholesterol.
Yes,
And I've read that the whole question of cholesterol, whether the so-called bad cholesterol is really bad for you, even that is up in the air. But
absolutely.
it's
Yes.
a big seller for the drug
Huge,
companies.
huge seller. I mean, a lot of the cholesterol-lowering drugs, the older ones, are all off patent, so there's not as much money in there as there used to be. But yeah, again, you've got huge numbers of people who are told when they're 50 or 60 years old, they get a blood test. The doctor says you have high cholesterol, and I want to treat that. And that treatment involves a daily ingestion of a cholesterol lowering drug, which are not completely benign either. So here's the one ironic bit about cholesterol lowering is that one of the most common adverse effects is that it causes muscle weakening. So
Right.
people have difficulty getting out of chairs or walking up the stairs and that kind of thing. Well, if you're worried about your heart disease, the first thing that you should do is exercise. If you're taking a drug that stops you from exercising, which is what cholesterol lowering drugs do to some people, you're making them sicker, not making them better.
Yeah. And can I say that the same thing has happened with a lot of the blood pressure drugs?
Yeah.
They've changed the definition of what high blood pressure is to again incorporate millions and millions of people who probably don't have high blood pressure, but will now start taking the medicines.
Well, they don't have dangerous high blood pressure. It used to be that if you had, if your blood pressure was 160 over 100, that might be considered high, and maybe you could do something to reduce your risk of a heart attack or stroke. But they have lowered that level over the years. Then it came down to 150 and then 140. And now they're saying people with 120 over 80 have borderline hypertension, which is absurd. And the most troubling thing about that is as you get older, your body naturally has a higher blood pressure for a variety of physiologic reasons and so on. But older people need a bit of a higher blood pressure in order to have their brain function properly, and in order so what happens with older people, they're told they have high blood pressure. They take sometimes 1, 2, sometimes 3
Yes.
antihypertensive drugs, and then they get up in the morning and they stand up out of bed and they fall down and break a hip. So they end up with what is called hypotension, which is too low a blood pressure. They don't have enough blood to their brain, and that can be dangerous as well. I think anyone who's older or has an elder parent and the doctor's going after them to lower their blood pressure, I would say you need a second thought on that. It's many times better to leave well enough alone.
can we trust the doctors? Because there's a big flow of money between the pharmaceutical companies and the doctors.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've written out about and studied over the years quite a bit. I mean, most doctors want to do well. However, the quality of the information that they get oftentimes is tainted. They'll go to dinner sessions or even lectures in universities where the spokespeople are researchers for the drug companies, or they're paid consultants, or they're people who own stock in the companies. And so they push this line of lower numbers and that kind of thing. They have conflicts of interest. And so, it's really important to know whether your doctor is getting good quality information or not.
There's also perhaps a question of, I mean, the drug companies are very powerful in our healthcare system. I mean, I've heard they run the universities and the training the doctor gets. Are they in it? I mean, I've got my own opinion of this, but are they in it for public health, or are they in it for corporate profit?
Well, they have both interests. The people in the drug companies will say that they are providing a overall a public health benefit by the use of the drugs, and it's not that is completely false. Some of those drugs are very helpful, they're very useful, and they help some people live longer and healthier lives. Those are people who are extreme end where they need some level of pharmaceutical treatment. But the biggest concern for me is when you lower the bars, whether it's your weight or your blood pressure or your cholesterol level, you lower it and you get more and more people who are otherwise healthy. And so, I think that, and this is something that I've been talking about for many years, is that we have to get the drug money out of physician education. And there are numerous examples, we cite them in the book, and there's been numerous examples since, where physicians are kind of swimming in a sea of pharmaceutical spin, and they need good tools to avoid that spin. And it's difficult because there's so much of it, but avoiding contact with pharmaceutical reps is probably one of the best things that they can do. If you're in your doctor's office and you see pharmaceutical reps waiting to see your doctor, you can be pretty sure that the decisions that your doctor is making about drugs may be not as evidence-based and as cautious as they should be. I think, drugs, again, very helpful for many people, but also they have to be used appropriately and not for frivolous reasons, for preventative reasons when people are otherwise healthy. If you're otherwise healthy, a drug is not really going to do much to improve your health.
How many millions of people are taking these various drugs? For example, Ozempic, or let's say the cholesterol drugs and the blood pressure drugs?
Oh, probably in say British Columbia or in Canada, the number, and this is just an estimate, the number of people, say between 60 and 75 years old, who take cholesterol lowering drugs might be somewhere between 15 to 20%. That is way beyond what I would consider to be even a rational kind of approach to preventive medicine. Maybe amongst those people, those who have established heart disease might have some level of benefit. That would probably bring it down to maybe 5 or 10%. So I think you've got quite a large cohort of people are being treated with these drugs without a good chance of benefit, and probably a likelihood of harm. It's not just cholesterol, it's high blood pressure as well, drugs for osteoporosis. Even things like attention deficit disorder, and I've written quite a bit about this, a condition which is typically boys, girls as well, but mostly boys who are energetic in classrooms, can't sit still, have trouble focusing, and the teachers recommend to the parents, you should do something. The something involves a trip to the doctor, where the doctor might prescribe a stimulant, a Ritalin type drug. And those are widely used. I remember, Jack, like 20 years ago, maybe 3 to 5% of kids in elementary school might be prescribed these drugs. It's probably double that now. And again, they're a gateway drug that leads to other drugs as well down the road.
I took Ritalin once. I was at a friend's house and his son was taking Ritalin and he gave me some. I still remember it was a very pleasant afternoon.
You were able to focus, were you? Yeah, I mean, so some people say that they help them with their focus, but you know,
It was just very relaxed and happy. That's what I recall
is
of
that right?
Ritalin.
So
Yeah,
maybe you should get on the bandwagon and be marketing those drugs, Jack.
yeah, right, right. Um, One last thing. I don't know if you want to go here, but I know you've talked and written about flu shots, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
I'll just finish with that. Are they effective and should people be taking them?
So, like with any drug, you have to say effective for what? If for example, for me, I never get the flu. I don't know why. So, I, why would taking a flu vaccine really help me? Because I typically don't get the flu, and if I do, and I haven't probably had it for more than a decade, it's usually mild and it passes. When you look at the studies around the flu vaccines, you find some very troubling things. And that is that most of the time, the flu shot is very minimally effective. I won't say it's completely ineffective, minimally effective. And it doesn't do the things that we expect it to do, which is to say, when you hear people say, oh, you should get the flu shot so you prevent from having serious complications of the flu and keep you out of the hospital. So where's the evidence for that? Well, there isn't any good research to show that. They push the flu shot on elderly people quite a bit, and again, I would say no good evidence that it's preventing the kind of complications that you want to prevent. So there's an awful lot of money being spent and an awful lot of injections of people with flu vaccines that have no benefit. And if there's no benefit, then you're only likely to be harmed. And quite frankly, people have been harmed by, drugs and vaccines over the years. And so you have to ask yourself, what's your risk to start with? And if you're not too worried about getting or working through a case of the flu, or if you rarely get the flu, the benefit for you is probably quite small.
And does the flu vaccine actually prevent people from getting the flu?
Well, like I say, minimally, we look at the sort of big studies and the number needed to vaccinate, which is a number that's an idea of effectiveness. It's somewhere between, I think for say people my age, it would be like 1 in 71, something like that. So you have to prevent one case of the flu, you'd have to vaccinate 70 people. Which another way to say that is that the 69 people who are vaccinated don't get the flu anyway. So it would prevent one case out of 70. Then the numbers might be marginally better for younger people, might be 1 in 30. If you like those odds, yeah.
Alan, thank you very much. We've covered quite a few different topics today. Is there anything you want to end up with, or
yeah, I mean, I don't want people to think that that all drugs are useless and you shouldn't take any. You should be asking good questions though of your physicians. And the basic question that you could ask is, what happens if I do nothing? Right? And the average flu season, what happens if I do nothing? You're probably not going to get the flu. I mean, the number of people even during flu season who get the flu, the percentage of people, it's very small.
And if you ask your doctor that question, are you going to get an answer that you can trust?
Well, I think good physicians will know the numbers needed to treat. They'll know the level of effectiveness. They will probably be sold the bill of goods, which is you need to take the flu shot because we're told by our professional association that it's good for you. But if they actually understood the numbers, I think a lot of physicians would be quite reluctant to give the flu shot to most of their patients.
Yeah. Alan Cassels, thank you very, very much for some very interesting information.
My pleasure. Good talking to you.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.